Just going to do quick introductions and then we'll get you started. All right. So hi, everybody. My name is Robin and I'm a regional coordinator with Frontier College, where I work both in Toronto, but then support programs and staff throughout Southwestern Ontario. So just for today, if you can remain on mute until Emily and Rory invite you to either unmute or put your questions or comments in the chat. Also, if you need to adjust your view at the top right-hand corner of your screen, you can select either speaker view or gallery view. But yeah, Emily Davies Robinson. Oh my gosh, Emily.
That's okay.
I'm sorry. I have the wrong page. I'm so sorry, everyone. I work closely with Emily, but I'm just okay. Well, I'll just read it. Emily Davies Robinson is the community coordinator in Guelph and Waterloo, and she's going to be our presenter today, or co-presenting with Rory Webb, who's the intern for Frontier College in Waterloo. And I'm just going to turn it over to them.
Okay, thanks, Robin. So welcome, everyone. Glad you could join us for this final workshop back in April 2020, not long after the pandemic first hit. One of our community partners, the YMCA of Three Rivers Immigrant Services in Kitchener, asked if we could switch to offering a virtual one-to-one newcomer homework support program so we could work with newcomer families that we would have typically supported through a group after-school educational support program that we've run with them for many, many years. So Frontier College made that pivot, and we came up with a policy for online tutoring. And we now, over a year later, we still have our one-to-one individual newcomer homework support program with the YMCA Immigrant Services, with about 25 to 30 learners being supported every semester, in addition to some group programming that we offer. So this program has been really crucial to supporting the families that have faced challenges during the pandemic in terms of being able to keep up with the demands of school, especially as we've been going remote. And we've been able to provide that constant educational support through our tutors on a one-to-one basis during this whole time. So now, over a year later, Rory, I have with me the Frontier College Waterloo intern, Rory Webb, who's been with this program since day one, essentially. And the two of us are here to share some learnings that we've developed over the past year, some strategies and effective tools that we utilize for our individual online tutoring. Note that we do run our programs using Zoom, so there is a bit of a Zoom bias in our presentation. However, we know that there are similar features used in other video platforms, similar to the ones that we'll be discussing in this presentation. So many of the techniques can still be applied using other platforms like WebEx and Teams, so if that's what you're using, or Google Meet for that matter. So we'll be going, as I said, over some techniques, some tools and resources that we find effective. All these are volunteer approved and tested. Rory will also be going through some really useful educational activities and resources that we utilize. Most of them, in fact, are free. There are some membership-based resources too that we're going to highlight. We're going to talk about some challenges that we've encountered and some troubleshooting techniques, and then wrap up with some take-home messages, and hopefully there will be a bit of time for some Q&A. If you do have some questions for clarification throughout, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat, so I'll do my best to respond in a timely manner. If you do have a question that's a bit more involved, hopefully I'll harvest that question and hopefully I can get to it at the end. And I will be providing my contact info. So if you do have more specific questions, you can reach out to me directly. And note that these slides will be posted to the Frontier College website, I believe next week. So you will have access to these resources later on. Okay, so with that, I'll pass the floor over to Rory.
Thanks, Emily. So first, I just want to quickly cover some general tutoring tips and best practices and how they can be applied online. So the first thing is, for your first session with your learner, A big thing is logging on 5 to 10 minutes early to ensure we've always used Zoom, but whatever virtual platform you're using is working. Myself, I've had issues with my audio not coming through. I even had one in the last call for anyone who attended workshop 3. For anyone who attended that workshop, I had an audio issue. So logging on early is a great idea just to make sure that everything's going okay. It's also important to use your first session as an opportunity to get to know your learner. So just talking to them about skills that they want to build on, weaknesses they want to improve, and establishing goals or areas to work on so every lesson has a clear direction. And then, of course, referring back to these as you wrap up your future sessions to ensure that as you move through, you're always working to achieve what your learner set out to achieve at the start of the program. And the last thing here is that schoolwork should always take priority, but with working online, there's various possibilities for your learner to not be able to arrive with assigned work. Perhaps they completed it, maybe they're having issues sharing the Google Classroom. So it's always important to have additional resources available, and that's something that I'll really highlight later on. So some structure and sort of session tips. The major thing is being engaged, especially now that we're working online. It's easier for learners to feel a little bit disconnected. So it's really important that you're making eye contact, you're being conversational and encouraging your learner to discuss with you. This is huge for our families as well, because as Emily mentioned, we work a lot with newcomer families. So some of them don't necessarily have an English conversational partner at home. So just having someone that'll talk to them makes a huge difference. So being that person, being conversational and friendly to your learner goes a long way. And to follow up with that, checking in to start is also really important for that socio-emotional development. Just checking in, being a friend, asking them about their week, and just talking to them sort of as a person before you focus on their work helps a lot. Also narrowing the focus. So kind of as an extension of that, you can then be like, so what did you work on in school this week? And then focus on a single subject area so that you know during your weekly session that you have the time to accomplish something and finish something concrete towards their goals. Then using online tools. So as I'm doing right now, using the Spotlight and other annotation tools and other online websites and resources that are available to you for the best learning experience for them. Reviewing, so this is something that I want to add on to the first session, is if your learner has recently completed their homework, they tell you that they're done all of it, have them review it with you. Talk to them about what they thought through, like their thought process through different questions, and try and assess their level so that in the future you can handpick resources that best match their skills. And then, of course, paying attention, it feeds into being engaged, but if your learner looks distracted, if they look really tired, just being able to talk to them and take a step back, figure out the source of that distraction and try and address it, as opposed to moving forward and just pushing through it, because then that's often less productive. So some things for creating continuity between your sessions. Using annotation features and screenshots is huge. I highly recommend, if you're going to use Zoom annotations or annotations for any program, taking screenshots of the work that you've been doing with your learner and saving them somewhere to either send to the learner or the learner's parents, or even just keep for your own reference for future sessions. So that way you can revisit things, they move back and forth. And as Emily's showcasing, there's things like stamps that you can also use for learner engagement. Like you can use stars to highlight really great work, questions to be like, hey, what was your thought process here? Can you walk me through this step of the problem? Check marks to check off great work. Just all sorts of stuff like that to make it a little bit more engaging and a little bit more exciting for them. And then, of course, chatting about next steps. What would they like to work on next? Is there something that they should do at home to prepare for the next session? And then considering your effectiveness. It's always good to stop and reflect and say, you know, maybe these resources are a little bit too high a level, too low a level for my learner, and trying to adapt and find things that are really appropriate for them. So now I'll get into some tools and resources. First thing that's going to be hugely helpful for any online tutoring is screen sharing. So I'm going to highlight the screen sharing tools in Zoom because that's what I'm most experienced with, but a lot of them will function similarly in WebEx or Teams or whatever platform you like to use. So to begin a screen share in Zoom, you press the big green screen share button on the bottom of your screen, followed by selecting the option that you'd like, and then pressing the blue share button. This kind of tripped me up the first time I was sharing because I had figured that once I selected my option, it would immediately start, and then I didn't see this little button in the corner. So just something to watch out for. Another important thing to note is if you want to share a specific browser tab on Chrome, like how I'm sharing this presentation, what you need to do is open that tab in your Chrome browser before trying to share in Zoom, because it will just open up to whatever Chrome tab you last had open. So like Let's say you want to share a resource, but you had your email open, you'd then be sharing your email to your learner. I've almost made that mistake a number of times. And then if you want to share sound, like a YouTube video or an educational video for your learner, and you want to share the sound that's coming through on your computer end to your learner's end, you just have to check off this box that says share sound, although there is a workaround for that. So if you forgot to check the share sound box when you open your screen share, but later realize you want to share the audio, like you found a video that would be really helpful, but you don't want to cancel your screen share because that's kind of awkward, you can just navigate to more on the little toolbar that it opens up, and there's a button for share computer sound, and now they can hear everything that you're hearing. So another really helpful tool that opens up when you start your screen share is this toolbar with the annotation feature option. So it just drops down to this menu with a whole bunch of different good educational tools. And to make best use of these educational tools, I'd recommend screen sharing a whiteboard. So it provides a blank canvas for working on complicated problems and just allows your student a space to showcase their thinking, work through problems. An important thing to note with Zoom is that if your learner is working with a Chromebook and they have Zoom downloaded as an extension of Chrome, they won't be able to share a whiteboard with you. So you may need to share it or collaborate through an online whiteboard, which is something that I'll highlight in just a couple seconds. So before that, I do want to quickly demo what Zoom's whiteboard looks like and how you can use that to engage your learner. And one thing that's good to note as well, in addition to it not working with the Chrome extension, the Zoom whiteboard doesn't allow for copying and pasting. So one thing that I really want to highlight with online whiteboards is it's super helpful for complicated math problems because you can copy and paste from a worksheet into a whiteboard to allow the learner blank space to work on. You can't do that with the Zoom whiteboard, but you can draw in questions or equations and have them work. And what you'll see is your learners are also able to annotate. As Emily did earlier with stamps, they can annotate on this whiteboard and solve the problems for me. So I found it to be a really good space for things like long division, where your learner needs a lot of space to do the work. I won't demonstrate long division because I don't remember how, but it's a really helpful space for more complicated problems like that. And as you can see, Emily's annotating. So I'll just go back to my original screen share. So a really good online whiteboard resource is the Google Jamboard, which functions through Google Drive. So if you have a Gmail account, you can log in and make Google Jamboards. It works with you sharing a link with your learner, so it's a common space online without the need for screen sharing. If both of you have the link, you can both work on it through your browser outside of the Zoom call. So that way, if your learner has issues connecting to Zoom or they can't screen share because they're on a Chromebook or they can't have their video on Zoom, you can just share the link with them and both of you can be working on it on your own screens and just using Zoom to talk to each other. So I've attached a link for Google Jamboard there. Now I'll quickly highlight how to make a Jamboard. So once you log in with your Google account, you'll see this little plus sign, which is where you'd make a new Jamboard. And then an important thing to do is to click share on the right to get your link. But it's also important to note that Google will default to anyone that's being shared the link can just view the Jamboard, which doesn't help a lot with an online whiteboard because then your learner can't annotate it. So you just really want to be sure that when you open up the sharing menu, you click the change to anyone with the link and allow your learner to be an editor. So that way they can edit the whiteboard and show their work on the whiteboard as opposed to just having to tell you what to type out. So as I mentioned earlier, this is a great space for copying and pasting problems. So you can do this with the snipping tool on Windows or Command-Shift-4 to take a partial screenshot on Mac. So what this allows you to do is you can just pull up an online resource. And then as you can see here, I'm highlighting just the question that I want. And then I would copy this and paste this onto a Google Jamboard for my learner to have a blank space to work on it. This resource came from the CEMC, which is a University of Waterloo math resource that I'll highlight later. But I found this to be a really effective way to work on their problems. So back into Zoom Screen Share and some different ways to use that. You can also use Zoom Screen Share with a web link to kind of function that web link as a worksheet. This is something that I really like to do with my learners when I was doing one-to-one tutoring, is I would share a page with questions on it like this, and then using the Zoom annotate features, I would directly annotate, I would directly annotate on the page in front of them. So that way I don't have to copy paste anything into a whiteboard. I can just work on it straight there in front of them. And I could even have my learner annotate along with me. I could say like, how do we simplify this fraction? And then I would have my learner annotate and use things like stamps to direct their attention and be like, talking about this fraction here, because after a little while, it can get to be a whole mess on the screen. And then when I'm done all of that, I would save my annotations and send it off to their parent after the session so they know what we've been working on. So let me just clear my annotations. So the quick tools that I just demonstrated there were the, one second, I'll just full screen. But I was just demonstrating the draw tools and the eraser tools. The draw just allows for quick freehand drawing, which I find really useful for things like fractions, or if you want to do division, because I don't remember the keyboard shortcut for those things. So it's a lot easier to just quickly freehand them. But they also have a tool for text, which I would highly recommend for if you want to type out more fundamental principles and things that you really want your learner to have as a take-home message. Like in this case, we were simplifying fractions. So I said, you want to have whole numbers, no decimals, no dots. So I wanted to write that out because my handwriting on Zoom is really not great, as you can see with this 8 here. So if I wanted my learner to be able to read it, I would just put it in text. One important thing to note with the text feature that confused me for a little while is if you want to move a text box to somewhere else, like let's say I didn't like how it was overlapping with this blue, I would have to switch to the select tool here and then click on the text box and drag it. If you just click on text it again, it'll create a text box over it and just quickly becomes a lot to deal with. That's another trial and error thing. So the stamp tools and the spotlight tools are also really useful. Emily demonstrated the stamp tools earlier, but I can quickly highlight what some of them look like. They're good for like quick corrections like a star or a check mark, and also really good for things like asking about a thought process or putting a little arrow in to indicate a start point. And I also use the spotlight a lot to direct attention. I really like to use it for things like graphing and spatial awareness problems, because it's like, okay, we're going to start over here and I need you to work to over here. It's just really good for spatial awareness and directing focus to a specific spot on the screen. So once you've made all of your annotations and you'd like to save them, all you got to do is press the save button in the far right. And once you do that, it will open up a folder with the screenshots for this Zoom meeting. And I believe the folder saves underneath the Zoom file in your computer. But what I would recommend doing to avoid having to try and find this folder after the meeting is just clicking the show in folder button that automatically pops up as soon as you save an annotation. So then you have the folder ready and you can drag and drop all the images directly into an email or directly into a larger collection of everything you've worked on with this learner in the past. So now I'll cover some free educational activities and resources. First one I'd like to cover is an online library for guided reading books, or read aloud books, sorry. So this is Starfall Library for grades K through 2. And it's picture books with accompanying read aloud. It has about 6 or 7 free books. And as you can see, when you click on the book, it'll read aloud with a red marker going along, telling you which words it's following with. It's just a good way for your younger learners to read along with you. Another resource for slightly older learners is Storyline Online, which is again read aloud of picture books, but this time they have celebrity readers and really great animations. It's good for grades 1 to 4 and can also generate a bit more excitement around literacy because you can have celebrities that your kids are familiar with reading to them, and that's a lot more engaging than robotic voice. So another good supplementary educational activity source is ABCYA, which has educational games for grades K through 6 and kind of test skills in more fun, creative ways. This is one that I'll actually quickly demo for you. So here, when you click on the link I've provided, you're just greeted to this screen, which separates based on grade. So one that I've liked to demo is within grade 2, let's say, you can choose to do activities based around literacy or math, which will be structured under number. And here for grade 2, one that I found to be a really good visual demonstration of how base 10 blocks work. It's this base 10 game, where once you open it up, it's just a quick flash game to illustrate the values of the different base 10 blocks, drag them into the middle of the screen, and it'll show their place value on a screen. So here you can just quickly show what each of them are worth and their impact on the place value of number. And then ABCYA also has another great literacy resource in their Story Maker. So this is a fun and easy way for your younger children to create and print their own stories. You can actually save them as a PDF to print them off. So it's really intuitive. I'll again highlight this one because it's a little bit easier to see how it works with a demonstration. Just gotta let it load and get through our cute little intro. Okay, so yeah, once this one opens up, you'll be asked for your name, which I'll just quickly input. And then from here, you have both the option to add text and drawings to your story. So it'll default to this paintbrush, which indicates drawings. So you can have your learner draw things like, say, a little smiley face. As I mentioned, my Zoom drawings are not great. And then you can add text using the capital and lowercase a. So you can say things like, welcome to my story. And then if you'd like to see how it all comes together, you just click on the bottom left and click on this whole page view. And then you can see both your image and welcome to my story. So this could be a great way to do things like simple comics or graphic novels with your learner if you had them drawing and adding text as they go through. And free to save, free to print, so that's pretty awesome. And just for future reference, if anybody would like to revisit these slides, I have attached a little like free graphic to any of the free resources. Some of the membership-based resources you'll see later on have free components. So I've attached that with the conditions underneath. So if you want to just allow for a quicker reference when you're going through in the future to see which ones are free and easier to use. So for all of you, for everybody based in Toronto, TPL Overdrive is a great online reading resource, online literacy resource. So it's a library of ebooks that you can use with the Toronto Public Library card. And anybody can get a Toronto Public Library card if they work, live, or study in Toronto, or just have a postal code beginning with M, which I believe it also includes Etobicoke. And I also just want to quickly cover that if you are interested in literacy resources for younger learners, Patty did a great workshop earlier today, which you can watch the recording for. I believe it's workshop number 2. So I would highly recommend that if you are interested in online reading resources for younger learners.
Yeah, and this is Patty from the Toronto Public Library, so there's definitely like more Toronto specific content there.
Yeah. Now a science resource that I really want to cover because it's been a lot of fun and a great way to generate excitement at the start of tutoring sessions is National Geographic Kids. So this is for learners grades 1 to 6 with themes of like animals, planets, holidays, just all sorts of stuff that kids are always interested in and will always be fun. So I just want to quickly demo some of their quizzes because I found them to be a really good way to get your learner talking about something, because with the quiz list, you can typically find most kids' favorite animal on the list or something that they're interested in that they're really excited to demonstrate their knowledge on. So like I've done the shark quiz a couple times. The one thing I want to warn everybody about is it was difficult for me. I only got 3 out of 10. One of my learners got like 6 or 7. So the kids may know this much better than I do. But here it just has quick quiz questions that are all multiple choice. And then it'll correct you as you go. So does anyone want to guess what the largest of all sharks is?
Whale shark.
Awesome.
Let's try that.
And that was correct.
Well done.
This was one of the ones that I slipped up on the first time through. I got baited into great white.
I
These
know
ones are just
everything
a
because
lot
of
of fun.
Wildcrats.
Rugrats? The what? Oh, Wild Kratts.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I know that show. Awesome.
Awesome. But yeah, those are just a lot of fun for your kids and a good way to get them talking at the start of the session by quizzing them on something that they're passionate about. Then another nice science activity for grades 1 to 6 is the virtual field trips. This is one of the resources that was in the offered guide earlier today for anyone in Angel's group program demonstration. So this is just a collection of online field trips to different locations like San Diego Zoo, the Great Wall of China, Mars, and other places. So again, this could be a cool way to start a science lesson by showing them hands-on different things. Like if you wanted to visit one of the live cams at San Diego Zoo and then talk to them about the different animals that they're seeing, it's a really great way to introduce those types of things. So here I'll just scroll down to show. you have like baboon cams, sorry, hard for me to say that, and hippo cams. So like if you wanted to watch a live feed of the hippos, and then you can talk about, you could even watch like a National Geographic video on hippos and then link that to this. Just different ways to make the lessons more exciting because now they're actually seeing it in action. I won't watch that for too much longer because it looks like it's buffering my video. So now some of our learners are also ESL, so I wanted to highlight quickly some ESL activities for different grades. So for the youngest of our ESL learners, we have found online flashcards for testing vocabulary and practicing. So these flashcards come from ESL Kids flashcards, yes. And on their website, you can access them either with or without the accompanying words for practice. So I took a screenshot of their animals flashcards without the accompanying words. But if your learner really needed the vocabulary practice and the practice of sort of recognizing the written word, then you could have the words underneath for them to associate with the images. Another great ESL resource for kids that are slightly older, grades 1 to 6 roughly, is ESL Toolkit, which contains a bunch of activities with things around like simple reading comprehension, understanding semantic categories, vocabulary practice, and some simple grammar. So this is a screenshot from their Unscramble game, which works by dragging and dropping these components of a sentence into the correct order to make something that's grammatically sound. So here I'll just demonstrate their reading comprehension stuff as well, because I think it's really cool. So here, when you open this up, they have both fill in the blanks and reading comprehension. I've been focusing more on the reading comprehension myself, but I'm sure the fill in the blanks is also quite helpful. But here they just have short, simple passages that then ask comprehension questions on the right-hand side as multiple choice questions. And this could just be a great way to get your learner talking to you and discuss with them about what they read. And you can even use them as branching off points for different aspects of what they read. And maybe asking them some stuff that isn't necessarily in the multiple choice questions, but could build off of their knowledge from what they've read. Another great ESL resource for older learners is CBC ESL, where CBC has released news articles that can be read with people that are learning English, and they have accompanying questions which help with comprehension of grammar. So it's articles that come as audio recordings, but you can also click a link to view the transcript, which is what I would recommend, because then you can read the actual article along with your learner and then talk to them about it. And then they also have these questions below the transcripts where it's find the mistake in sentences. If the grammar is correct, explain why or why not. So there's an example there, just a story about a grandmother in Barnwell that they'd like you to correct the sentence on. A great educational activity for coding, which is a really exciting part of the math curriculum, I believe, is code.org's Hour of Code sessions. So they've tried to make activities for grades 1 through 6 based around things that are really popular, 4 through 9, sorry, based around things that are really popular with kids of that age. So one of them is the Hour of Code based around Minecraft, where it teaches them sort of the fundamentals of the code that are used to run the game. So I played around with these and had a really good time. But let me quickly demo one of those, because it'll showcase both the code and then how it runs on the side, so you can see the impact of different commands on the actual game. And they do have little introductions with the creators of Minecraft, so that could get the kids excited if they're familiar with it, because then they're listening to people that design this game that they love. So then here, it'll just explain the simple, like your objectives, and you'll have a workspace here on the right-hand side, and then an output on the left-hand side that you can see in the game as you go. So for example, if I was like to move forward, you turn left, and then you run it, and you can see him moving forward and turning left as you go. So it's just a really cool way to show the underlying code of games that learners are familiar with.
Rory, I just want to mention we have about 20 minutes left, just to give you a heads up.
Okay, thanks. I couldn't see the time.
That's okay.
Okay, another good resource that I'll quickly highlight is Mathagon, which is a fun source for math games for grades 6 through 8. I found it really good for teaching spatial awareness through this game that they have called Factorus, which is Tetris, but you can adjust the shapes of the blocks. So that way they can kind of spatially view what would fit in what spot and learn a little bit about maximizing area and minimizing area. Another great educational resource for learners in grades 7 and above, really as soon as they start working with linear functions all the way through calculus and advanced functions, is Desmos. This is something that I myself used back in high school, and it's just an online graphing calculator that'll display functions as you write them out and can show you in real time how different components of an equation affect the output. So for example, if I was to do like 1/2 x plus 3, you can see that it starts up there. And then if I was to change the slope to be negative, you can see that it immediately flips the graph. All these things to show them the actual impact of the math that they're performing. And then moving on from Desmos, another educational resource for grades 1 to 12 that I highly recommend is Khan Academy. They have videos and practice questions for every major subject. I myself use them for studying for the MCAT, so I can recommend and attest to the quality of their resources. So if you want to find really anything on there, once you open up the site, they'll have a courses drop menu that you can drop down to find your desired grade and subject. So like, for example, grade 3 math is one of the options there. And then within there, they'll have a course summary that includes all different areas of, it's not aligned to Canadian curriculum, but it is a lot of similar concepts like one-digit multiplication or factoring for higher grades, things like that, where they'll have videos to explain it and then practice questions and quizzes that you can do on their site. And finally, I've gotten to the one that I demoed earlier, the CEMC, which is a University of Waterloo resource for math for grades 7 through 12. This one is aligned to Canadian curriculums, so it's not Ontario specific, but it does have a lot of similar activities. Subject areas can include things like calculus lessons, which are really hard to find online, so it's good to have a reliable resource for these things. And then again, it's structured very similarly to Khan Academy with videos that are followed by review questions. So this is one of those areas where I'd recommend sharing your computer sound, playing a video, and then discussing with your learner and having them work on questions, because there are things like vectors where admittedly I've taken the course, but I'm not very fresh on it, so it would help me as well to watch a video. But I'll just quickly demo what the site looks like. So when you open up any one component of their courses, you'll then be greeted to these lessons, and then some review and some practice exercises, which is where I took the snip from earlier. I would recommend just taking a snip of one of these questions, dropping it into a whiteboard, and working on it with your learner. So some membership-based activities and resources. First one is the Prodigy game for math for grades 1 to 8. This one actually came recommended from some of our learners in our math program. They, at the end of program, were all comparing their levels on this game. So it's something that I know they get engaged with at home and that they can take home with them and work on outside of their sessions. So it's structured into like an online video game where the math questions are the battle mechanic, which you use to sort of level up and advance in the game. So when you log in, it asks you for your location, and it will try to make the math questions as aligned with your local curriculum as possible. So for Ontario, it will try its best to align with the curriculum. And then membership is free here, but sign up is required. So your learner has to have an email and input all that stuff. So this is something that might be good if you know they already have an account. You can have them play this with you to kill some time towards the end of the session. Another really great resource for creating a comic online or a graphic novel is Pixen, which is subscription-based for printing or downloading the comic, but all the other functionalities are free. So you can create a comic, you can input characters, text, speech bubbles, all of this stuff is totally free and you can make an online comic. It's just that when you come to the point of creating a PDF, downloading it, or printing it, that's when you need to subscribe for your $10 a month membership, which you can cancel at any time. So this could potentially be used for something like if you had funding for a graphic novel program, you could work on it for free for a while, and then at the end of the program, quickly pay your $10 to print it off and give your learners a copy of what they worked on. And the last resource that I want to highlight today is IXL, Math and English, for grades 1 to 12. This is another one that is aligned with the Ontario curriculum, but can be a little bit pricey. So they have math and English are their two main components. So it's $19.95 a month to subscribe for both, or $12.95 for one subject. The reason I really wanted to highlight this is they do provide 10 free questions a day. So some of our tutors who are teaching older learners can get a buy with this alone, because if you're teaching things like a grade 12 calculus concept, you're not realistically going to get through more than 10 questions in a session. But if you're teaching a younger learner, I wouldn't recommend leaning on this resource because I've very quickly burned through the 10 questions in the past. So I'll just quickly showcase what it looks like. When you log in, you will be asked to become a member, but you can ignore all of that and just scroll down to whatever concept you'd like to do. So let's say we go to grade 9 math. They'll have a bunch of different sections of the curriculum with each concept with practice problems. So for example, like adding and subtracting rational numbers. And then when you open it up, all the questions will display in the top left up here. So lastly, some common program facilitation challenges and troubleshooting. So an issue with screen sharing is pretty common, especially with our learners that sometimes have poor Wi-Fi connections. So in this case, showcasing their work can be difficult. Some solutions are turning off your camera and having them turn off their own camera. It's not always recommended because it does hurt with the engagement aspect of it. But if there's no other way for them to share their work, then that could be the best option. It's also asking them to send you the link. So if it's not something like Google Classroom, but more of like an online PDF that they have to work on, then they can send you the link and you can share your own screen if you have a more secure connection. You could also share something new on your screen that's related to what they've been working on. So if they've been working on, say, fractions, you can find a fraction worksheet, share that yourself. Also, if screen sharing isn't working on either end, you can collaborate through an online whiteboard, which is what I would highly recommend, and what I demonstrated earlier with the Google Jamboard. And then also sometimes learners will have issues with logging into Google Classroom from home. So one thing that we've noticed is a lot of families are more familiar and more comfortable using Google Meet. So we have, in some cases, accommodated this by switching our programming to Google Meet. And in these cases, there can be a source of confusion between a Google Classroom and a Google Meeting, and learners will try to log into the Google Meeting through their own personal Google Classroom, which will then block that because the school board doesn't want them in random meetings. So one thing we want to emphasize is the importance of highlighting to a learner and their parents that they log into the Google Classroom in a separate browser, log into the Google Meet in a separate browser, and then you can put them together after, but they should have separate logins. The Google Meets should be through the parent's email and not the learner's personal email. So lastly, just some big take-home messages and wrap up. So the first thing is it's really important to be prepared. If you have resources ready and you've tested your technologies and stuff before your sessions, it just makes everything run a lot smoother. You know that you're prepared for anything that can happen. But to go along with that, kind of the opposite end is being flexible. There is a certain amount of preparation that you can do. You can have resources ready, but inevitably technological difficulties will arise. Things will happen, sometimes you can't hear your learner, sometimes your learner can't hear you. It's just about being flexible with those things, dealing with them as they come up and getting more comfortable dealing with these problems the more they arise and gradually getting better at online programming, something we're still learning ourselves. I think one of my personal most rewarding experiences with online tutoring was a session where I was really struggling to connect and to teach my students something. And I could just tell that they were comfortable knowing that if I was making mistakes, they could make mistakes. And then we got to have a lot more open discussion because both of us were more comfortable being human and making mistakes. And then that feeds into being relational. So at Frontier College, our approach is always centered around the student. So we have this approach called student-centered individualized learning, which I've linked a guide to below. You can visit yourself after this training. But it's just all about making a connection with your learner and trying to build a relationship first so that they can feel comfortable and confident to grow and to learn with you. And that's really the biggest take-home message that I'd want to highlight, is just making a safe space for your learner to learn and just being a positive presence in their life every week, because online learning is hard for everybody. So yeah, thank you all for participating and listening. And I'm not sure if we have time for Q&A. I haven't looked at the time.